So, E3 2017 has come and gone. We've seen the games, the hardware, the cringe, the funny, the meme-worthy, the disappointment, and of course, the potential greatness that awaits. We can now focus our attention on the cool stuff to come and not regret it when our wallets are empty by the end of the year. Though you will early next year, seeing as though there's yet again a game-packed winter and spring. E3 was good this year, and there's plenty to look forward to. Hello everyone, I am RedBeakRaven, and welcome to my After E3 discussion. In this video, I will be talking about what things this E3 interested me, what I'm most looking forward to, my top 10 games list, and what I liked and didn't like, and so on and so forth. I won't be mentioning everything, so if I've missed things out, it means it doesn't interest me or I just forgot. There were so many things to look at this E3. Apologies for the lateness of this, it was my intention to get it out last week, but I had issues with my mic, and then the audio file was missing audio, so I had to record some parts again. Then after editing it, the problems just persisted. Got there in the end though. Right, lots to get through, so let's just jump into it, shall we? So first up was EA's conference. Now I don't have a lot of thoughts on the conference as a whole, because I mostly just paid attention to the parts I wanted to. It's EA, what did you expect? So as expected, Need for Speed Payback was on show. It looks alright, sounds alright. Fast and Furious game that's not crap. I'll take that. A Way Out was a surprise. A story-driven co-op game that has you find a way out of a prison. If you're a fan of games and Prison Break, this might be the title for you. It caught my interest. I like how the two characters' stories play out at the same time on screen, but I don't know if I'm a big fan of that. I wonder if seeing and hearing two things at once may be distracting and perhaps a bit overwhelming. It's got me thinking, probably a bit too much, but it's definitely one of the more interesting things to come out of EA's conference. I was quite disappointed we didn't see Visceral and their Star Wars game this E3. It was a prediction of mine that we'd see it, obviously that was wrong, so I'll take that as it won't release until late next year, beyond E3. And of course the biggest thing going for EA was Battlefront 2. As expected, we saw gameplay, which looked good, and visually it was stunning. It is reassuring that they mentioned the previous Battlefront and its feedback like they did. The inclusion of a single player campaign was something they made sure people knew was in this one. They shouldn't have to emphasize that, but you know, at least they got it right the second time. The story does sound interesting, but if you'll allow me to nitpick, I wish they showed more of the new trilogy in the actual gameplay footage, and some actual footage of the campaign we all wanted to see. So it looks very nice, gameplay seems good, I like Star Wars, I'm interested in this. Overall, EA's conference was probably the weakest for me. Most of it just wasn't the slightest bit entertaining or even interesting, so yeah. What the hell was that? Let's move on to Microsoft, shall we? So I have a lot of notes for this one, to my huge surprise. They, as expected, came out straight away with the Scorpio, which is named the Xbox One X. Not the name I'd have gone with, but you could have done better. Or worse, I suppose. Xbox One Up, Xbox 2. What's wrong with simple ordered numbers, Microsoft? Honestly though, it's just a name, but I can see it confusing people. I mean, you've got an Xbox One S, then the Xbox One X. I can just see there being issues related to mishearing the last letter. The console itself doesn't look any better or worse than the others. Shame they aren't sticking the FPS counter on the front of the release console. It's small, which is good, because if you've ever owned a PlayStation 3 or an original Xbox, you'd appreciate the newer hardware being the size it is. As for the specs themselves, I wasn't hugely impressed, but it is impressive for a console. It's not a night and day difference to the PlayStation 4 Pro, but it is more powerful, though the memory is a bit of an issue I'd have with it. 1 terabyte of storage is pretty low by today's standards. Games are getting massive in case you haven't noticed, so it would have been ideal for at least 2 terabytes. And of course, there's all the 4K that you may have gotten sick of hearing about. If I had £1 for every time I saw or heard 4K at this conference, I could probably afford an Xbox One S. The price was surprising actually. I anticipated for it to be higher than $4.99 or $4.49 here in the UK, though $4.99 is still expensive. The downside however is, unless you're all up for 4K and current title enhancements, there isn't a great deal of incentive to buy an X, especially if you game on a PC and have the necessary hardware to run things in 4K. I hate exclusives, but they sell systems and Microsoft still doesn't have a great deal of them, though that could be mainly due to them releasing games on Windows 10 also, which I will not complain about. One of the reasons I liked this conference was because I could play the games on my PC, but the Windows Store needs COD that needs sorting out, or just bring the games to Steam, you may as well. It seemed like their plan to combat this lack of console exclusives issue was to just go down the console first exclusive route, which had me confused at first, but then I realised it didn't mean console exclusive, just that it'll release on the Xbox One first. I really don't like that practice and do not see how that's a decent incentive. Hated it when it happened with Fallout 3 DLC back in 2009, still hate it now. What do you think about that though? Let me know, that's something I really would be interested in knowing people's opinions on. So let's get to the game, shall we? And there was a lot of them, and about time too. They started off with Forza, not really interested in this myself, although why they had an expensive car that was revealed at a game conference is beyond me. It was a portion relevant to the game, but were they getting commission for every sale? I don't know about that. Come on. Trying to flog an expensive car at a gaming event. So how about that Metro Exodus? That was a nice surprise, wasn't it? It looked good, the atmosphere seemed great, looks as if they really pushed that further. Some nice colour there, it's intriguing, we'll be heading out of Moscow. The crossbow looked cool. I really do like the makeshift weapons in the Metro games. It feels more real with the world being in the state that it is. It seemed like there's more open exploration, which is quite the antithesis of the previous titles, even though Last Light had a lot more open space. But the sense of difficulty surviving out there still seems to be present, though the reveal looked very scripted. It did say it was in-engine, but we have to see core gameplay before we go any further. It's not that big a deal though, it was only an announcement trailer, so we shouldn't judge just yet. Anyways, let's move on to something that surprised me was at Microsoft's conference, Assassin's Creed Origins. So we now know for absolute definite it's in Egypt, and it's focusing on the beginning of the Assassin's Order, which will be interesting to see. Egypt has been a highly desired setting for an AC game for many years, and I'm glad to see they actually do listen to the community, and it looks fantastic. A really nice, authentic looking Egyptian civilization there, but it does seem more fantasy than historical, or rather historical fantasy, which I like. We saw a giant snake, a controllable arrow, and of course what seems to be a Ubisoft trend at the minute, a drone-like tool in the form of an eagle. Though I will say it does suit the game. Stealth looks like it actually works in this, combat has definitely been reworked, seems to be less counter-focused than previous titles, a bit more hack and slash. The shields are a nice touch, and I love the idea of it taking a more RPG approach. To be honest, it may serve Assassin's Creed well to just transition to an RPG series, which I'm most certain is the intention. There's experience points, we can collect weapons and equip them, a skill tree, it ticks all the right boxes really, so it could be a nice change to have more control over our assassin. But what I do need to see is what they've done with the modern day stuff and more of the open world content. What can we do outside of missions, and are there 500 collectibles we all love to collect? You know, I did have faith in them not doing stuff like that until I saw they've kept towers in. However, apparently using viewpoints doesn't update your map, it unlocks fast travel points. It's still towers. Oh, Ubisoft, you just couldn't resist, could ya? Oh dear, if they're far and few between I can live with that, but damn it, Ubisoft. That was then followed by PlayerUnknown's Battleground, but the only thing I have to say on that is the ghillie-suited player with a frying pan was funny. That was good. Now, as expected, we saw more of State of Decay 2 along with its release season next year. I'm really hoping this takes everything from the first and improves it, except for the annoying side missions that never left you alone. The combat looks better, I could never say whether or not I liked it in the first game. They seem to have kept the base building similar, but perhaps more in depth. It appears they may have and hopefully doubled down on the moral dilemmas you could find yourself in the first game. They've retained that sense of hopelessness from the looks of things, and I'll be very interested to see how this pans out. Minecraft yet again got its spotlight, though I really don't know about 4K Minecraft. I mean, why do you need pixel graphics mixed with 4K? It looks better, but what? Oh well, I'm sure some people will like it, I suppose. So the Artful Escape was something that caught my attention. It looked weird, the music was good, and I especially like them saying it's coming when it's damn ready. I can't say it's something I'd buy based off what we saw, but it's bloody different. I've never seen a side-scroller like it, so I'm all for weird-ass looking games. We then of course saw more of Sea of Thieves. It looks good, sounds good, but I'm skeptical of it. Plus the multiplayer is my issue with it. I just don't fancy multiplayer-only experiences. I've heard this can be played solo to an extent, but you will be at an obvious disadvantage. I do love the humour of it though, just firing yourself from a cannon to another ship or landmass, that's Jack Sparrow stuff right there. That is a good one, I'll give him that. Some great looking sea combat, it's quite immersive isn't it? Being a crew member that does one of the many jobs required to run a ship. Combat looks alright, nothing special. I'm interested in seeing and learning more, but that's about it. I don't see myself actually picking this up, but there's plenty of time yet. There was a Conquer imposter shown off. Super Lucky's Tale reminds us that the 90s are back. Well, platformers at least. Can't say it did anything other than make me think it was a Conquer game, but it looks alright. It's a game I'd have probably played about 15 years ago. Cuphead actually got a release date. I'll bet some people were happy about that. I really do like the 1930s cartoon art style for this. It's absolutely impressive and also quite innovative in the gaming space, isn't it? An interesting run and gun platformer I'll be on the lookout for this year. And as someone who loved getting in touch with their feminine side and playing as a teenage girl at an American senior high school, I was very happy about the Life is Strange prequel announcement. Before the Storm, as rumours suggest, follows the story of Chloe Price before she went full on punk and Max discovered she could alter the past at a hefty price. You know, I didn't realise that was a pun until I read it back. If you haven't played Life is Strange, that won't really register. It'll be interesting to see the events leading up to Life is Strange, though it's set 3 years prior. It was also later announced Ashley Birch wasn't voicing Chloe, which is a shame, but at least she consulted as she herself revealed. Somewhat surprising, but actually nice it's only 3 episodes. I imagine it's just to tide us over until Life is Strange Season 2 comes out. Now the game I am eagerly awaiting for this year, Shadow of War, showed up as I predicted it would, and I wasn't sure if I really wanted to see more of it. I do want to go in and see some surprises, but after seeing what they showed at Microsoft's conference and this entire E3 overall actually, oh, I am so looking forward to this game. To see the Nemesis system get doubled down on, in fact Monolith stated they doubled down on everything. The ambushes look like they could make various parts more challenging and keep you on your toes. I really like the internal conflicts. The idea of a war between orcs other than the ones you dominate has always interested me. Love the humour in this. The orc dialogue in the previous game was very good and seems to be just as good if not better in this. I can tell you now, if I see Bruz, I'm making him chief. I do wonder how much of the world we can explore outside of these orc camps and strongholds. I like the prospect of exploring the entirety of Mordor. Maybe not every inch because Mordor is an incredibly large region, but yeah, the world looks interesting to explore. A lot more colourful too, which is nice. I really like how far this Nemesis system goes with orcs seeking revenge. I saw a stream later on where one of the devs talked about how deep the system goes with that. Apparently orcs have friends and those friends could come after you if you kill one of their mates. I think this game overall will push the personal narrative more than the last, which is good because it's different, and Shadow of Mordor's story was barely memorable even for a really big Tolkien fan. So I don't expect much in that department for this, but we could be surprised. Battles continue to look fantastic and I could talk about this all day really, but we'll move on. Maybe that's a future video. So, Ori and the Will of the Wisps. That was quite a touching emotional reveal, wasn't it? As someone who's not actually played the first, I thought it looked incredible, and as soon as I'm able, we'll play Ori and the Blind Forest. So while Microsoft didn't have a live orchestra like Sony, they did have one beautiful piece of live music. You know what, if I rewatched that moment where the owl sees the bones of the other owls along with the music, I could cry my eyes out. And that's all from a trailer. Oh, I might have to download the soundtrack. Now, what was a very cool revelation from Microsoft and makes it even more tempting to invest in an Xbox One, not the X though, was that Microsoft are bringing original Xbox games to the Xbox One. Now that's excellent. Their support for backwards compatibility across the board is really commendable. They also ensured that all Xbox One accessories and games would work with the Xbox One X, which they should have really, let's be honest, it's not something we should be hugely praising. However, they're a corporation and they could have made separate stuff you had to buy, so there's that. I wish Sony would take this backwards compatibility approach also, instead of PlayStation Now, because that just isn't ideal for a huge amount of people. I say that because I own a PS4 and am predominantly a PC gamer. You'd think for a PC gamer backwards compatibility isn't that much of an issue, but I could tell you if you don't already know, it bloody is. Ever since making the transition from Windows 7 to Windows 10, half of my physical PC game shelf does not work no matter what I try. It is getting difficult to run old games on modern modern systems, and that's not just due to new operating systems. So the original Xbox game support is very good news, and it's more than just about playing old games, but preservation, something Nintendo likes to make very difficult. So following that, we got a pretty decent look at BioWare's next big thing, Anthem. And first things first, don't those facial animations look good, eh? They are never gonna live that up. Now, I wasn't blown away by this as some people were, but I was impressed. In fact, I had to watch the gameplay reveal again just because I wanted to make sure it was as I remember seeing it. Love the idea of going all Superman to explore the world and even its watery depths. It looks gorgeous, and despite the fact I'm not that big a BioWare fan, I'm very interested in this. It's got a huge amount of potential, and I do hope it turns out well. BioWare, it seems, needs a big win at this point. Also, forgot to mention the last night. That looked great. Quite unique and definitely something of interest. Overall though, Microsoft's conference was a strong one. Much better than last year. Perhaps their best one yet. You know, I didn't predict or expect a lot from this conference, and that makes it all the more better. It was enjoyable, they had some great games. We didn't get the huge focus on hardware like some people predicted. Some parts could have been better, but as a whole it was a good, maybe even great conference. So now for Bethesda. Well, that was a conference, wasn't it? Half of one anyways. Alright, so let's begin with where they began. So they had a cool intro to the whole thing like they did in 2015, which I don't think they did last year. Involving the kids was cool. I got the feeling they were trying to display that sense of family within Bethesda. Then again, they could have just utilised their children for good PR. They knew the conference was shit. So following that, it appeared that Bethesda was just getting all the less interesting stuff out there before getting to the real announcements and trailers. We saw both Doom and Fallout 4 VR as I expected we would. It looks cool, but I have no idea what VR is actually like, so not much I can say here. I like the look of Doom VR more. Fallout 4's VR was impressive, considering the scope of the game, but I don't think even with such games getting VR support, this is going mainstream anytime soon. After that, we got an acknowledgement and promotion of the Elder Scrolls Online Morrowind, which I expected. I don't know what the reaction videos were meant to accomplish there. Most of that trailer was just marketing current content, but mostly the Morrowind expansion. They did, however, announce 2 new DLC packs. Horns of the Reach, which sounded more like the Shadow of the Hiss DLC, which I don't really care about, but what was interesting was the Clockwork City. There are only 2 reasons I play ESO, and that is the lore and the world. It's nice to just explore Tamriel, and Sotherseal's Clockwork City is one location you hear about a lot in the Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind and ESO, and it sounds interesting to explore, so I am intrigued by that, but I doubt I'll get round to it the time it releases. Okay, now we come to the big bad wolf of the conference that huffed and puffed and blew almost everyone's feathers the wrong way. It is, of course, the Creation Club. Oh, the controversy I saw this spawning the second it was revealed. Bethesda really did a bad job of displaying this, so I'm not going to say much here because I made a separate video on this in particular. So if you want to know my thoughts on the whole thing, check that video out. The link will be in the description or in the cards to the right of the video. All I'll say here is, we need more information, but I can understand how many people think of it like that. The examples they use, the crab armor, the weapons, bad examples. It's sort of worrying, but I'm optimistic about it. I would like to see it in action, see what content comes out of it, and hope it isn't all a microtransaction fest. From the sounds of it, this is not Skyrim Paid Mods 2015 edition. With that in mind though, it was a bold move from Bethesda, I'll give them that. Right, next up was more on Legends, which I think I predicted. Nothing of interest for me here. They showed some Skyrim related stuff because that title just does not go away, does it? Which leads me to Skyrim on the Switch. I didn't think they'd show it at the conference. I thought they would have left it for Nintendo's thing, but what they showed off was cool, the Ambio gimmick and such, how the Joy-Cons work when detached. Do people still want or even care about motion controllers anymore, or is it just Nintendo being Nintendo? Anyway, something I will talk about here is just Skyrim. Skyrim. Despite how much of a fan I am of the Elder Scrolls, as much as I love Skyrim, I'm honestly sick of seeing and hearing about the damn thing. Skyrim for Legends, Skyrim Switch, Skyrim Special Edition, Skyrim Creation Club content. I know it's relevant to what they've done and are doing, but come on. It's almost a 6-year-old game and it's been pushed like it came out last year. I have to show this by the way because this made me laugh. One of the top stories on Reddit Monday morning after Bethesda's conference was this. It also doesn't help that this conference turned out like it did. I'm a bit of a Bethesda fanboy, but I won't hide my frustration with them at this time. Seeing Skyrim again and again, Fallout 4 VR been priced at the same as a new release. Anyways, let's move on before this becomes a rant. So Dishonored 2 got its first DLC announced as I expected and wished for, though it's actually a standalone expansion and it looks pretty good. Death of the Outsider is something I'm looking forward to. I was struggling to see whose shoes we'd step in next, but as soon as I realised it was Megan Foster or Billy Lurk on screen, I thought, of course, who else would the DLC have been about? It seems Dowd is alive and well enough. What I really like and also worry about though is the death of the Outsider. That is... wow, interesting, and makes me wonder about the future of Dishonored. The Outsider is a massive part of the story and the world. I'm not sure where they could go if he goes. If the Outsider is successfully killed, does that mark the end of the franchise? I hope not, but it's a possibility. To finish things off, Bethesda revealed the 2 unannounced titles that we saw on the Bethesda land map. The first was The Evil Within 2, not a huge surprise in all honesty. I listed it as a possible prediction in my previous E3 video, and it was likely to happen, wasn't it? I thought Starfield could have been there in its place or some other project BGS is working on, but really, realistically, next year I think could be a better guess for them. Anyways, wasn't a fan of the first Evil Within, but I may give it another shot in light of this. Psychological horror, which this seems to focus on, is definitely one of the more interesting types of horror. The trailer didn't do a whole lot for me, but the creepiness and strangeness is appealing. I don't really know, to be honest. I think I might just let this slip off my radar. The second title that was announced, as was very easy to predict and somewhat of an expectation, was Wolfenstein 2: The New Colossus. I just very recently finished The New Order and thought it was a good game overall. Glad to see it won't be long until I can continue the story, but I want to play the Old Blood first. Love the American setting, even though it's not World War II, I've always found that alternate history concept of the Nazi Empire invading the US fascinating, ever since I discovered Turning Point: Fall of Liberty, an old game where Nazi Germany occupies the UK and invades the east coast of the US. I just love what ifs and counterfactual history. Anyways, getting off track now, so the new Colossus looks good overall, and visually thanks to id Software's new engine. Combat's nice, some new cool toys to play with. Frau Engel, the cow, is still up and kicking and could make for an interesting main antagonist. BJ's back, the lovely Anya's pregnant, people are tripping on drugs, and there's even more Nazi scum to kill in many different ways. What's not to like? Okay, so overall, Bethesda's conference this year was fairly weak, for me anyways. It was an underwhelming conference, a disappointment really, considering how good the past 2 were. I didn't have high expectations, but I was still... honestly, I was shocked. It was short and sweet, and some people might like that, but in my opinion, if you can't dish out an hours-long conference, or 50 minutes at the very least, there's not much point in doing one. A contributing factor to that was the get-straight-to-the-point approach with Bethesda Land, which was actually a cool way to show everything off. What did make it worse, though, was how late they put this on, and it was probably even more disappointing for people like me in Europe up at around 5 AM to watch the showcase. What they had to show, I really struggled to see the point in having their own conference for all that. There were really only 2 announcements of note. I think one problem, and depending on how you feel about this is a problem or not, was that they focused on what's releasing this year. I don't think there was anything for 2018, whereas the other conferences, especially Ubisoft or better yet Sony, showed what's to come much later, though a lot of that might be early 2018, therefore before next year's E3, and Bethesda probably doesn't have anything for early 2018. A lot of people were not happy that there was no mention of The Elder Scrolls 6, which in all honesty, I'd have been stunned if it was. Believe me, I want The Elder Scrolls 6 just as bad as the most die-hard fans. I'm not happy with the idea that it'll probably be at least another 3 to 4 years before we hear anything of it, but it's kind of like a Half-Life 3 to me. Only I know it's coming eventually, but it's somewhat at the back of my mind. Overall, I don't think Bethesda should have had a conference. They were clearly lacking in lengthy content and new titles in comparison to others. So the next shindig was Devolver Digital's thing, but I'm not drunk enough to go through that. Suffice it to say, it was unparalleled. To say more though, just brilliant. Right, now we move on to yet another company whose conference was significantly better than their last, Ubisoft. So they started out with a bit of Nintendo fun, which to some people translates to cringeworthy displays. I personally thought it was alright. The props Shigeru Miyamoto came out with were cool, and Mario plus Rabbids Kingdom Battle looks like it could be quite a bit of fun. Just a nice start with a fun looking game, and an unexpected one at that. So we of course had another and new look at Assassin's Creed Origins, but I've already talked about that. It actually feels good to have not seen an Assassin's Creed delayed for more than a year. The series needed a break and it has helped. I have said I'm still not ready for one yet, but after seeing this, oh, I do want it. It does genuinely look awesome. I cannot believe though that they actually showed over-the-shoulder gameplay for a good amount of time on a really dark screen as well. Either that was just the camera or Ubisoft thinks that's how you save on the energy bills. Not like they need to, considering how many different editions their games have. If anybody plans on pre-ordering this, which Origins edition do you plan on getting? I mean, there's plenty to choose from. There's even a collector's edition for $6.90 friggin' what? What's in that? An all-inclusive in Cairo? Also, see, they haven't followed EA and done away with the season pass. Oh, come on, Ubisoft. Why'd you have to let EA have one up on you? We got to see what the Crew 2 was all about. Doctor Strange meets street racing, apparently, from the trailer. I am very skeptical of this, but I really like the way they are thinking. That it's not just cars, but bikes, off-roading, monster trucks, planes, boats. The concept's almost mind-blowing, but whether the game will actually be good remains to be seen. Though even if it turns out to be a mediocre title, I love the idea of flying around all America. I could just do that if the world was nice enough to look at, and the game does look pretty. No races, just fly from Florida right across and up to Washington. Obviously I hope the racing itself is good, but you know, it's not often you get to fly around the entirety of a country in a video game. Wow, I got real close to the mic there. But Crew 2, is it too big for its own good, I wonder? Regardless, I am actually excited for this. Probably more than I should be, but the concept is just so good. Shame though, it was probably the most boring showing of a title this E3. There was no music to the gameplay shown, and that really proved how much you need background tracks for such a presentation. So moving on, we got more South Park: The Fractured But Whole, along with a new release date. We'll see how well that date works out. We also got Elijah Wood. I was just watching that thinking, what in the name? I was just so surprised for some reason. Turns out he has his own film studio and is working with Ubisoft on a VR title called Transference. The more you know. Assassin's Creed Black Flag, but without the Assassin's Creed part, was announced, Skull and Bones, and I was on the edge of my seat when this was being revealed, right up until they said it was a shared world and looked like it was a see-only experience. I honestly thought this was the pirate game I've always wanted being shown. I thought they did it. They took Black Flag and made a proper pirate game, and then my excitement just... Though that aside, the game does look good for those that may want that type of thing. The combat looks decent. I'll definitely be interested in playing the beta if possible, but I doubt it's something I'd actually get. As expected, we then eventually saw more of Far Cry 5. I really do like the setting. The main gameplay itself looked... well, Far Cry, really, which is a good thing. It was all very Far Cry indeed. It looked brutal, love that. The mowing down enemies with a tractor, I think I can get behind that. It's all very interesting and not something we see often enough in those types of games. That particular setting instantly made this more appealing than the last two. Plane combat is very interesting. I wonder how far they've gone with the gameplay in terms of what we can use to traverse the world. We've had cars, boats, a little Diddy helicopter in the series, but never planes, so that is a nice touch. Right, now, Ubisoft are lying buggers. Beyond Good and Evil 2. Well, they actually showed it. Can you believe it's been almost a decade since the teaser trailer dropped? But that isn't the same game as this one, apparently. So the trailer itself was probably one of the best I saw this E3. It was funny, I loved the tone of the game, which I believe is quite the shift from the first. When you've got a swearing monkey delivering Swiss chocolate to an angry pig, I mean, that sounds like a good night at the zoo, you just have to roll with it. I thought it was great overall, and even better when the developers took to the stage. It was a nice moment to see Michel Ancel emotional about this. I love that passion, and you can just tell how important this really is to them. So Beyond Good and Evil 2 seems to have an interesting set of characters. It's a very ambitious title. I really like the sound of it, but it's in very early days indeed. In fact, I've seen time and time again since Ubisoft's conference that they are in 0 day of development, so wow, that's a long wait. But I look forward to seeing and hearing more about this in the future. Ubisoft's conference overall, though, was very good, believe it or not. They've definitely gained some points. They dominated the whole thing for a lot of people thanks to Creature Comforts Tourette's Edition, Beyond Good and Evil 2. Most of the games shown were interesting, and I was entertained throughout. It was certainly better than the last 2 years, and much better than expected. Yeah, great conference. Let's just see how the games perform. Right, let's get to Sony, shall we? They had well, not a live orchestra, but still live music. They really shouldn't stop doing that, by the way. The moment that they do, the conference is already slightly disappointing. It was relevant though, it led into Uncharted The Lost Legacy, then Horizon Zero Dawn DLC was announced. Good to see that's getting more support. Sony was just straight in there with the games, no messing about, just getting on with it. That felt like the attitude of this entire E3 really. We saw more of Days Gone. I was more intrigued by this gameplay than I was at the previous conference. It looks good, visually impressive actually. We got a somewhat better look at its dynamic world. It's not all about zombies, or zombie humans at least. Animals are also a threat as well as humans obviously. There's QTEs which I don't mind, hope there isn't a lot of them in this, but that's just a preference for me really. The zombies in the air on stage, that was a good bit. Just showing the money off, aren't they, Sony? I like how zombies can be considered as a tool rather than just a threat in this, to use them as an advantage against others. I'm not entirely sold on Days Gone, but I am more interested. There's zombie bears, how can you not be? Unless you're not a fan of zombies. We got a trailer for Call of Duty World War II. Looks nice. Looks like more of COD in all honesty, but a little bit more brutal. Not as dark as I had hoped. I don't think this will be the World War II game I would like to see. You can check out my potential on World War II games video if you'd like to know more on that. Self-promotion, tick. Yep, Call of Duty World War II. Nice change of pace, but we'll see. Skyrim for the PlayStation VR was announced. Bloody Skyrim. 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 Skyrim, 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 Skyrim. Skyrim. This game, I swear. There was quite a decent chunk of VR on show. The Impatient was intriguing. Final Fantasy Fishing, that's incredible. Stuart Little made an appearance. I know that joke's probably been made 100 times already, but it's what I thought as soon as I saw it. I am of course talking about Moss. A cute little mouse with a green gloved sword. It looked good. However, I'm not sure why such games are in VR. Perhaps someone could clear that up for me, but it is a little disappointing that it's a VR title. Looked like a good little adventure game. Right, God of War. Never played one of them myself, but the gameplay we saw last year was very intriguing. This year it looked even better. I know a lot of people are hyped for this. I hope it turns out well. It certainly appears entertaining. That father-son relationship will be interesting to see as part of the narrative. The action looked pretty phenomenal actually. They seem to have set the focus towards Norse mythology in this, and that is very intriguing. I do like a bit of Norseness, if that's even a word. Yeah, God of War looks excellent. Definitely interested in this. So, Detroit Become Human was shown off again as expected. David Cage's games continue to intrigue with their incredibly in-depth branching narrative. The title's overall concept, the idea of robots, androids feeling like human beings is a thing of huge interest to me and always has been. That question of if such a thing were possible, the creation of androids or just AI that can feel like we do, and that whole moral dilemma it presents. Does it matter how you were created? Does it matter what you're made of? Or if you were programmed? You know, that complicated situation you often see in these types of stories. A lot of effort seems to have gone into this. This is a big budget title and I really hope it's just as good if not better than Heavy Rain, which is the only David Cage game I've fully played through. So I'm very interested in this. We just need a solid release date please. Destiny 2 was shown off as expected. Hope it turns out well, but it does have some kind of tough competition now with Anthem and other similar titles. Obviously it comes out before all those, but still it's a bit shadowed to me by others, especially after this E3. What's being shown doesn't hold my attention that much. I do have low expectations, which may be a good thing. They of course are in bed with Sony, they've got their exclusive crap. I just hate that practice whether or not it's termed exclusive. Nice to see the PC version is coming this year though. God, October is packed. Someone delay something, not Shadow of War though. Right, the biggest, most exciting game of Sony's show for me now, Spider-Man. Oh, it looks fantastic. I got chills at that Spider-Man entrance. The music, the screen pulling out was interesting. Bloody Sony showing off again. Visually, the game looks great. Stealth seems alright, the combat's very good, a nice mixture of moves there. The kind of acrobatic stuff you'd expect from Spider-Man. Some nice environmental interaction, that might spice things up a bit in combat encounters. That web slinging though, that was exhilarating to see. Very, very good web slinging. It seems smooth. It looks like they've matched themselves up there with Spider-Man 2, which if you don't know, is widely considered the best Spider-Man game out there, with probably the best web slinging in video games. The cutscenes were spectacular, as were the scripted sequences. I felt like I was watching a Spider-Man film, so I cannot wait for this game. I would like to see some open world gameplay and how far that goes. Is it just to swing around in, or will it play more like previous Spider-Man entries with side missions and such? Overall though, Sony's conference was a very entertaining one. Not quite as good as last year's, but there has been talk of them holding back for PSX later this year. Death Stranding wasn't there, but that was more of a wish than a prediction of mine. I think it's too early in development for Kojima to show anything. It'll probably be a 2019 game, so don't get too excited yet. Nothing on The Last of Us 2, which was baffling, but when I heard it was early in development, I thought, okay, that makes sense. In all honesty though, I don't like it when companies do that. Announce a game years before its release. I know it's to market and build up hype, but you lose track of things and forget and get worn out of the wait. So yeah, not a fan of that practice, but I suppose it's nice to know things are coming. So I love their attitude to it being all about the games. They basked in their exclusive glory, as they should. They've done very well this year so far with that. Love the use of the stage, the music, the pyrotechnics they had. All in all, Sony pulled a Bethesda, only it was 3 times better. They came out, showed what they had, and buggered off. See you in December then. Okay, so that was all the conferences. As a whole, they were pretty good overall. Less business rubbish, just a focus on games, which is obviously great. No, I won't cover Nintendo because, well, you know how they are. Microsoft and Ubisoft shone bright this year. Sony was good, just not as good. A lot of what they showed isn't coming until next year, so... Plus, I thought the show last year was more entertaining. Bethesda, of course, quite the step backwards, and EA's just EA. If I had to rate them, I'd say EA's at the bottom, then Bethesda, then Sony, and I struggle to choose between Microsoft and Ubisoft, so I'm not going to. They entertained and appealed to me equally. They both did a great job. I think Microsoft probably more so, but still can't decide between them. You know, they both had great games I can't wait to play. Right, let's take some time to go over what followed the conferences this E3. Some more Mount & Blade 2 Bannerlord gameplay was shown E3 week. Oh, it looks vicious and I love it. I absolutely enjoyed Warband. I've been waiting for this for years, and to see more of it is both great and annoying because I just want this title. It looks and sounds brilliant. Yes, I'm too hyped for this, but Tale Worlds tick all the right boxes and they seem to be really taking their time with this. My only hope is that it's worth the wait, and from what information came out this E3, their changes to the combat and strategy elements, it most likely will be. We got a look at some more Agony gameplay, which I'll say this game is disturbing, bone-chilling, and looks like hell. That's literally what comes to mind when I look at this. The design is fantastic. I cannot begin to imagine how the human mind could conjure such an image of hell as they have done with this. The atmosphere looks spot on. It looks like it's shaping up to be a thrilling, terrifying, and sickening experience. I know. Great, isn't it? Another Call of Cthulhu trailer came out. Press also got to see sections of the game in action, and it sounds very promising. I cannot wait for this game. I really hope it's good. It has to be, for the sake of all Lovecraft fans in gaming. I hope they've used the source material well, much like the Dark Corners of the Earth did, and have managed to display some of that which makes up Lovecraftian horror. The fear of the unknown, the incomprehensible, the psychological horror. It is somewhat difficult to capture that in a visual sense, but that doesn't mean they shouldn't do it. There aren't a great deal of good Lovecraft games out there, and Call of Cthulhu shows a huge amount of potential. Now, what was also a nice piece of information to come out at E3, or around it at least, was that one of the best zombie games to date, Dying Light, is getting even more free DLC. Apparently, around 500,000 people are still playing this game, and Techland sees that as players wanting more content. Great, can't fault that whatsoever. I still play Dying Light. It's a great game that may get even greater. That level of support is something we should see more often. The cynic in me wants to take this as them preparing people for something that's to come. This 12-month run of free DLC could mean a sequel is on the way. So speaking of the undead, we saw more of Don't Nod Entertainment's Vampire. I always forget it's the guys behind Life is Strange working on this. It looks better than it did last year. I've been interested in this since it first came to light. I think it needs a bit of a polish, but it does look promising. It is still in the pre-alpha stage, so there's plenty of time for improvement, and their emphasis on what was shown being pre-alpha tells me they are looking to improve it a good deal from now to release. Okay, so that is the games and the conferences. E3 2017 overall was pretty damn good. It was a great week of gaming. Gave us a lot to think about, look forward to, and make money for. Oh, we're gonna need money for the next year or so. The rest of this year and 2018 is looking good. I was a bit disappointed at how the indie space wasn't really focused focused on as much as I would have liked. Independent games and developers have really soared to new heights in recent years, yet E3 continues to be for the most part all about the big games. There wasn't much surprise game-wise with announcements and such, but there was conference-wise. I mean, Microsoft came out with a bang. Bethesda's conference was incredibly short, Sony's was shorter than expected, and ended quite abruptly, and Ubisoft's conference was one of the best. Yeah, quite the E3 this year, wasn't it? I think the biggest surprise for me was how underwhelming Bethesda's E3. I'm kidding. I think in terms of what I didn't expect was Metro Exodus, but in terms of how good a game looked, Assassin's Creed Origins was surprisingly more interesting than I thought it would be. Okay, so following the trend with the similar E3 videos, what are my top 10 games following E3? Well, this list is going to include games that weren't at the conferences but were at E3 in some form, and not games that are far from release, beyond Good and Evil 2 for example. So in no specific order, the first is Metro Exodus. Glad to see we're getting another title in that series, looking forward to seeing more of it. I'm even more interested in this now after seeing what ending in Last Light is canon. The whole story for the games is a really good one, and I have no doubt this will continue to be as good. The second would be Spider-Man. Looks absolutely fantastic. I've been waiting for a decent Spider-Man game since number 2 back in 2004. The third, Assassin's Creed Origins. Another great looking title. Will be nice to see a reinvented AC game, especially one that's in Egypt. Number 4, Far Cry 5. The setting really excites me. It looks cool, what with the planes, the animals and so on. Interesting characters as well. 5, I'll go with The Crew 2. Despite my skepticism, I am kind of excited about the prospect of flying across America, landing at an airport and just driving wherever. Or from what we saw later on in the week, just magically transforming into a vehicle mid-air. That's really good. As for number 6, Call of Cthulhu. Really hyped for that. I love H.P. Lovecraft's work and have wanted a good Call of Cthulhu game since playing Dark Corners of the Earth many moons ago. Number 7, Life is Strange Before the Storm. Love the first, interesting characters, want to get back into that world. The 8th on the list is Wolfenstein 2 The New Colossus. Looks great, American setting, more Nazis to kill, looking forward to it. 9 would be Cuphead. It's very impressive, unique, and looks like a lot of fun. And number 10 is Bethesda's Creation Club. I'm just excited about getting more official content. Okay, how many of you thought I was being serious? No, number 10 is Middle-earth Shadow of War, of course. What else would it be? No, it looks absolutely awesome. I like everything I've seen and heard about it so far. Cannot wait for this game. It's at the top of my list for this year. Excited for Creation Club. I said I was optimistic, but not that much. I'm sorry, that's genuinely made me laugh. So that, I think, is where I'll wrap this up. I've talked long enough to damage a vocal cord or two, so let me know what your thoughts are on this E3. List the games you're looking forward to if you want. What did you like or dislike? Let me know down in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you have to say. So there goes, one of the best weeks of gaming in this year. I'm very excited about the near future. Lots to discuss, I'll tell you that. So hit the like button if you like this video. You can also follow me on Twitter or like me on Facebook. Links to those you will find at the bottom of the description. Anyways, thank you so much for watching, especially if you made it through the entire video. I really appreciate it. So until next time, I'll see you soon.